The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Lauren Rodabaugh, and I'm the Marketing Manager at Gotham Technology Group. I'll be your host for today's session with Intel Security, and I want to thank you all for joining us. On the line, we've got Andrew Meyer, Gotham's Senior Director of Professional Services, and Carl Klasig, Intel Security's Product Marketing Manager for McAfee SIEM Solutions, to walk you through today's content. Hopefully you've received your Domino's order and you're settled in for our informative session. Before we begin, I just want to go through a few housekeeping items. To start, the webinar will run about 40 minutes and will include a formal Q&A session at the end. We will be recording the webinar in listen-only mode, which just means you'll be muted for the entirety of the presentation to avoid any outside interruptions. During this time, feel free to use the chat window, which is located at the bottom right of your screen, to submit any questions throughout the presentation. Andrew and Carl will address them all at the end. So thank you again to everybody for joining us. And Andrew, please feel free to get started.
Thanks, Lauren. Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks a lot for joining us. At Gotham, we're very excited to have McAfee Intel Security here today to talk about their Enterprise Security Manager solution. So I'm not going to stand in the way too much of that. I really just wanted to kind of set the stage, right? At Gotham, we work with a lot of different companies who invest, of course, in security, and they wind up buying a lot of different solutions to solve different problems as they arise in their world. And what we find is, each one has its own reporting capabilities, and each one has its own ability to do certain roles and functions within that whole layered security approach. But what we really lack is the ability to seamlessly correlate that data and really be able to get actionable intelligence out of all of the different alerts and data feeds that you may be receiving from advanced persistent threat protection engines or different antivirus engines or different perimeter security devices, all logging to different places, and then really bringing that data together and understanding the correlations. It's more important than ever to be able to do that. So what Carl is going to talk about today is some of the key considerations for really understanding, a more advanced approach to SIEM and understanding, how you can leverage that within your organization to really, again, get that actionable intelligence to be able to provide the solutions and the data that management needs in order to keep the environment safe and keep everybody informed as to what's going on. So I'm going to hand it over to Carl. Carl, the floor is yours.
Thanks so much. Thanks for joining me today, and thank you for Gotham for organizing this. Looking forward to it. So as Andrew was talking about, one of the big things is taking all that information and being able to get what you really need from it on a day-to-day basis. So when we think of the 5 key requirements we've outlined to cover off with you today for a more advanced SIEM solution around big security data, situational awareness, the real-time context, that ease of management and integration. We'll talk about that, and I'll go ahead and spend some time in each of those areas. But from a perspective of everyday use for all of us here on the phone and all of us out there taking on what is a very dynamic threat environment and incredibly diligent, right? It's around the intelligent analytics, the actionable information, like you heard Andrew mention, and the integrated response. If we look at those 5 key requirements that we talk about, they fall right into those buckets of the data, situational awareness that the analytics gave you, right? The context and ease of management, that's so important, and that really gives you that actionable information based on those analytics. And then that integrated response. We'll talk a bit about how we address that at McAfee with our SIEM solutions, the core being McAfee Enterprise Security Manager, ESM. So you'll hear me use ESM anonymously as McAfee SIEM because truly that's the brains of the operation, so to speak. So, and one of the big things that Andrew was talking about and I wanted to really point out is, it is putting it all together, and that's one of the strengths of SIEM, right? So you have perimeter security and still threats are getting through it, right? That's really the challenge that SIEM addresses. It finds and mitigates those hidden threats before they become breaches. And that's so much of what we read about and we all want to stay away from, right? So it's that combination of continuous monitoring, prioritizing the threats, providing that intelligence and those analytics to really help organizations like yours take action to resolve the threats in real time before they have an impact on your business. So that's what we're going to focus on today. So let's start right in with some of the things to remind us of why this is all so important, right? We're all seeing the recent breach reports and news headlines. We know we need to be more vigilant than ever for any signs of attack. And that real-time, actionable security intelligence is what's going to help keep us all out of the news. So the important statistics really to take away, bottom line of this slide, is that these breaches, the majority, were executed in hours or less. And what's even scarier is some of them took weeks and months to discover. So that's the big hole, right? We all know minutes count, and that's what's so critical. It's a time race. How quickly can you detect it? How quickly can you get the information you need to go ahead and stop it in its track and resolve it and understand where it had impact and happened? So that's really a big distinction to take away, is to understand that that is an incredibly challenging environment where minutes count. So when we talk about that and think about our everyday lives, it's, can we answer these questions? You know, I often chat with customers and analysts and et cetera, and you know, how secure is your organization? We're always asking ourselves that, right? So we always want to know what is going on. Can I see who's using my infrastructure and why? Do I understand what is normal use and what is not? You really need to be able to answer those questions and be able to investigate in real time in order to truly do threat detection. And how important is it? That goes back to the intelligence, right? Understanding how a threat can impact the infrastructure is crucial for prioritizing those incidents. And, of course, you want to take the right information to make sure it goes to the right people for effective investigations. You really want to help prevent your teams from, you know, from chasing after what is something false. And that's really important. And where should you focus? So we have an awareness of what's going on. We understand how much of a priority is, and how do we go after that, right? So that's the intelligence game that you need to take action to resolve those threats. So will your SIEM solution allow your team to investigate whatever they see? These are all important things. And we'll talk some more about how those add up. And of course, at the end of the day, security data, just like we talked about as being part of the 5 key requirements of an advanced SIEM, SIEM needs to be able to take on an incredible volume of data, right? We are in a world of always on. And of course, the volume of data that contributes to that, the SIEM needs to be able to find any indicators of compromise is huge. It's just exponentially more every year than it was the year before. So one of the things to consider is high performance. So what I really want you to understand from this slide is not just that I'm a Porsche fan, but the reality is that all of these things we just touched on lightly, and that we'll spend some more detailed time with over the next 30 minutes, all of those have an underlying need of being able to be delivered in a very timely manner, right? What good is the detection if it's, like we pointed out with some of the challenges that exist out there, if it's a day later, a week later, the next month? By that time, so much damage is done, it can be insurmountable, right? So the ability to get that information very quickly, the performance of the SIEM system you're using is incredibly critical, more so than it ever has been. And the reality, too, is as you do those investigations and use that information and actually use that information to resolve things, again, as you do queries and investigations, it has to be timely. It has to be real time because seconds and minutes do count. So when you'll hear me inject performance here and there, and it's important, that's why. Because at the end of the day, if you're working with an advanced SIEM that has that performance and scalability and that speed, then it really does make deployment and usability much easier in your life. It automatically will prioritize those security incidents. It will identify those threats. It will give you that centralized dashboard to go through to be able to answer those questions. I can see how my network's being used. I know who's using it, and I know who shouldn't be using it, right? And all of that with integration, because again, as we'll talk, the SIEM is all about taking in information from all the devices on the network. That's always a core competency. So how do we do it at McAfee, and what does that mean when we talk about McAfee Enterprise Security Manager? I'll go back to what we were doing on the opening slide, which is looking at those 5 key requirements and mapping them to what it really adds up to every day in 3 buckets, right? We need the intelligence, we need actionable information, and it needs to be integrated. Integrated means, of course, that there's really a broad data collection devices. In other words, all those firewalls and everything on my network, I can actually go ahead and automatically tie into that data and get it, because I need that, right? And again, that intelligence to go ahead and allow you to prioritize information. The goal of it is a smart SIEM, a fast SIEM, a high-performing SIEM, helps you really find what's important so your team can spend more time with the more critical issues and less time trying to understand what's really important and what's not. That should be the goal. It should be your right arm. So we'll continue this discussion in the next 30 minutes around intelligent, actionable, and integrated. Again, very clearly tied in with what's critical every day and key requirements for an advanced SIEM solution. So one of the things I wanted to point out is, one thing to listen to me, appreciate your time, but what do customers and analysts think? So you'll see here, and I won't read them to you, but there's some that are sprinkled throughout the presentation, kind of remind you of the practical end of a customer's perspective every day. So let's start by talking about analytics. So when we think about it from the intelligence perspective, we realize that, this growth that we talked about of digital business information, our always-on business activities, right? The volume of security data is huge. And you still need to be able to collect all that, because who knows where the actual indicators of compromise, little nuggets that let you know where a threat is are. You have to have all that information. So, and getting that intelligence from that data is critical in order for you to identify and resolve the threats, right? Baseline expectation. So McAfee SIEM really has advanced analytics that take on this challenge. It goes ahead and calculate the baseline activity for all the information in real time, and will go ahead and alert of any potential threats that are outside of that normal baseline behavior. One of the big advantages that many times customers will comment on is they quickly realize how their network is being used, and they didn't even realize much of that before. So it's that window into it and that understanding of what is normal activity so that you know what's not normal activity. Because that's what you really want to get to, right, and understand. It goes ahead then and does both real-time and historical correlation, because as we talked earlier in set of stays, you need to be able to understand when this happened now and has it happened in the past. So very important to be able to do that simultaneously so you can understand threats as they develop. Also, that contextual information, we talk about watch lists and global threat subscriptions and vulnerability scans, all those things that really go ahead and give you a very strong context around the threat and the investigation are critical. Additionally, with McAfee ESM, the Enterprise Security Manager, we also have cyber threat management. So it's a dedicated cyber threat management dashboard series that really gives you that awareness of any emerging threats and actually goes ahead and does that, confirming threat information reported via STIX, TAXI, McAfee Advanced Threat Defense, third-party web URLs, etc. So it's a great way to go ahead and simplify the consumption and management of all those threat feeds, because many of them can be incredibly valuable, as we know. So we understand the analytics, know how important that is, and of course a big piece of that intelligence is the prioritization. You're looking for the SIEM to do to a greater degree, right? I'm sitting here and I want to know, out of all this information we've established how big it can be, I want to know what I actually focus on. So McAfee ESM really does a great job of identifying those threats, agreed, and the baseline and all the things we've touched on, but it also prioritizes those security events automatically. So it takes all that raw data, and this is where you get the actual information, right? A centralized threat dashboard that gives you continuous monitoring and real-time threat awareness. So really you have timely access to the information you need for those investigations. When you have your 10, 12, 20 prioritized threats that you should investigate, they are right there, and you can drill into that information. Also, automated alerts and workflow collaboration. So when you have your internal and your external teams, it shortens time to respond and collaborate with them so that those valuable resources are focused on the right risks and threats to the infrastructure, right? And then last but not least, when we think about the McAfee solutions and all these great third-party threat feeds and watch lists, we need to make sure that that information is there and part of the correlation and part of the prioritization, because that can only result in reducing the time to respond based on, yet again, some great contextual information. So we also have with McAfee ESM dedicated risk dashboard. They proactively combine threat, vulnerability, countermeasure information, really to pinpoint those assets that are at risk. So those are also, again, an excellent value that go ahead and allow you to assess risk to your most critical assets and be able to prioritize threats based on that risk. So what we're going to talk about now is we'll go from intelligence, and we've covered off there, and talk a bit about actionable. So one of the things, of course, that we're all trying to do is just what this customer has captured, right, which is you want to be able to respond quickly with, quite frankly, intelligent decisions, right, effective decisions, with knowledge and the power to know that this is the right decision to do in response to this incident. So, and that's one of the things that is so critical to take away from the SIEM. They're relying on it to do that. So one of the ways that ESM does that is the dashboards. You heard me talk just a moment ago about all that information that's on the dashboards. And the reality is that you need to be able to investigate any of that, right? You're looking at that dashboard to tell you what should I focus on. Those are my prioritized threats. So in reality, it also should be, quite frankly, your pane of glass into what's going on in the network and what you need to focus on. And with ESM, you don't have to go elsewhere to do those investigations. Your forensics, your investigations, your real-time and historical, all of that is done from the same dashboard that you're looking at that gives you that real-time monitor of what are your prioritized threats. So you can essentially investigate everything you view in your dashboard and access both current and historical data, as I've mentioned. And all your ad hoc and forensic investigations start there. So it's a great comment recently when I was sitting with the customers that described, essentially the capabilities they were finding with ESM's security dashboard is what I needed was a way to roll up that collected information to one pane of glass. And it's really important because they could seamlessly integrate all that data into one dashboard. And that's what you're trying to do every day, right? Is we don't want to go to 5 different things to find this out. So again, going back to that minutes count threat environment that we're establishing here and unfortunately is a part of our lives, that's a critical capability that you need to have in order to prioritize correctly, investigate in a timely and fluid manner, right? Because you don't want it to be disjointed. Every time an investigation is disjointed and you can't get to the information in a timely manner, minutes count. So time goes by, and that means the threat can get closer and closer to being breached. And that's what we're all trying to make sure does not happen. So that centralized view of your threat and the risk and that ability to do just a one-click drill down are really critical. So what we'll take a couple more minutes to touch on here when we're thinking of that is we'll go back to performance. Why? Because again, I can't emphasize enough how important it is that as you look at this incredible volume of data, you need to be able to take that data on. So as that security data is growing exponentially, it's more valuable than ever too. So SIEM, of course, is in the position where it's rather unique in that it has massively high insertion rates, right? The need for real-time enrichment of all that data with all the context we're talking about that's so critical really demands that you have the capabilities to do simultaneous real-time and historical analytics. And those analytics are required for everything from basic pattern matching to long-term anomaly detection. So again, that's a lot for a database to tackle. So really with that in mind, it has resulted in, over time, with some of the legacy things and things that that have occurred in the early days of log management, is that it really needs to be a solution that not only can tackle this volume of data, but tackle it quickly. I can't tell you how many times I'll talk with a customer with some of the legacy solutions out there, the things that aren't capable of addressing that, and they will wait for hours for a report. And that's not an exaggeration, which is really scary, right? Because when you're doing an investigation, you need to get to the information quickly. So waiting for an hour for a report or 2 hours is a pain point. So at the end of the day, with our McAfee ESM proprietary embedded database, it really does take on those massive amounts of the data quickly. It'll do the enrichment in real time for that context, right? So you're getting that intelligence, that actionable intelligence that we've talked about, and the ability to get that reporting and analytics all on current and historical data at the same time. So Gartner even comments on the fact that one of our key strengths is that highly scalable database for that exact reason, because it drives the capabilities so many of these critical requirements of an advanced SIEM solution. So again, not to harp on it, but it is really important. So let's move now to talk a bit about ease of operation. So how important is that? Well, just like we've talked about performance, it has to be something that your teams can work with without it being a Herculean effort and 12 master degrees, right? That's a pain point. So the ease of use for Mac VSM really starts right out of the box, because we have included report views, correlation rules, alerts, and all of these are customizable. So what does that add up to you on a day-to-day basis? It means that you essentially can have out-of-the-box value from the solution that gives you the majority of what you need in your rules and reports and et cetera, including complete audit trails. So that enables you to get going quickly and realize the intelligence and have that prioritization beginning to go ahead and organize your teams and simplify their life, right, and make them more effective. So what we do beyond that is not only the 400 pre-built dashboard audit trails, as I mentioned, also, unlike some of the competitors out there, we actually don't charge for compliance. Out of the box, we are actually integrated with UCF, Unified Compliance Framework. So we have all the information needed and reports for more than 240 global regulations. So it really simplifies the compliance efforts that many of us face. And I know that it can be multiple compliance efforts in this day and age, and that can be rather daunting. So that is all simplified and always up to date because we're integrated what are the Unified Compliance Framework. So in addition, we also go ahead to make ease of use more palatable for you, not just in your day-to-day operations, but with more advanced security use cases. We have content packs. What we do, what these content packs give you is essentially pre-configured use cases. So it really gives the ability for your organization to go ahead and quickly have integrated threat and compliance management capabilities that are all pre-built for you. So we include an incredible amount of those out of the gate, and they are designed to simplify the operations by automatically installing, configuring the content pack. It includes views, reports, watch lists, alarms, correlation rules, etc., and other variables. And some of the use cases are insider threats, data leakage, malware, policy, suspicious activity, web filtering, etc. So again, the idea is that we understand the need to be easy to use, deploy, and manage, and also the importance of, in this day and age more than ever, advanced security use cases that you can immediately get going and get set up. So again, an additional effort to make usability something that is just a part of your life every day with Mac VSM. So touching now a bit, we'll talk about integration. So what does that mean? For many of our customers, it can mean a great deal. Not only is it some of the architecture pieces we'll touch on, but also the ability to automate what can often be first response to incidents. So let's talk about that. So essentially, Mac VSM delivers an incredible unified framework for hundreds of products to deliver that level of real-time visibility into the organization that you need to always be aware of your security posture, be aware of your threat, and be able to take action. So Mac VSM collects and correlates data from over 400 security products. And well, the SIEM solution collects valuable data from these devices across the network, which is critical in core SIEM competency. It actually also offers active integration to technology partners and other McAfee security solutions. The intention there and the end result for a customer with some of those active integrations is really the ability to take action right from the SIEM. So let me talk about that for a minute. So the reality is that with our partners and our own McAfee security solutions, such as McAfee ePolicy Orchestrator for policy-based endpoint management, McAfee Network Security Manager for intrusion prevention, McAfee Vulnerability Manager for vulnerability scanning and remediation. So also McAfee Threat Intelligence Exchange and so many of our partners that we have. So the idea is that you really have a closed-loop workflow from discovery to containment. These integrations allow you to automate, as I mentioned, really with our first response actions. It really helps an organization respond to attacks more quickly and efficiently. For instance, you can change policies at the endpoint, quarantine suspicious and malicious systems at the network, and gather critical intelligence through vulnerability scanning. And I've done all this from the ESM console. I have not left that dashboard that we've talked about throughout our time together here. So that's a critical value because, again, as we talked, it's time, right? How quickly am I getting to the information? How quickly can I understand and investigate? And how quickly can I take action? And this is yet another way that McAfee ESM can help you really tighten the response to incidents, can make sure that you are focused on keeping threats from becoming breaches and keeping you out of the paper. So an excellent opportunity to do really advanced integrations with our partners and our own fellow solutions. So when we talk about all this and the capabilities and the speed and the scale and the capacity and the integration, so how do we do that? So, well, we deliver that on a really scalable architecture, and that includes both physical and virtual appliances. So we have virtual appliances that run from 8 to 32 core, so very powerful solution. In addition, we also go ahead and offer a what we call an all-in-one combination, so a centralized SIEM solution, and then distributed for different larger enterprises that really need that additional scale and want to distribute across their enterprise. So, and we also do a lot with our architecture to make sure that data integrity is covered. As an example, our event receivers, i.e. collectors, they perform initial correlation. That ensures that data integrity and processing power are optimized at the brains of the box at the enterprise security manager. So in addition, we recognize that application monitoring, database event monitoring, those are areas that you may want to have dedicated appliances for in a distributed solution because you want to be able to go ahead and be monitoring those more in depth in many other areas simply because of the capabilities, right? So what we do is to gain that application and database context for ensuring that there's no performance impacts to the network. We offer these application data monitor, database event monitor appliances. So with the application data monitor, it is code all the way to layer 7. So that quickly identifies unknown application processes or suspicious data transfers. The database event monitor, it records the database session. So it'll detect rogue databases and really provides a strong audit for your databases as well. So also we offer a dedicated advanced correlation engine. So that's for advanced rule-less risk analysis and for historical correlation that involves long-term trending for mitigation. So again, it gives you the opportunity for those that are really into that advanced analytics and have the opportunity to go that much further with their risk scoring. They have a dedicated appliance to do so. And all of these that we mentioned, these additional options that you have in correlation, application, and data monitoring are all something you can add as you go. In other words, I can get my SIEM in place, my ESM, with log management and receivers collecting today, doing everything I need to do with all the features and capabilities we've spoken about. As I become more savvy and aware of my network and the areas that I need to focus on and dedicate some additional monitoring to or understanding and in-depth understanding of, I can go ahead and then deploy these additional options. They're not something I have to do out of the gate. So I meet with many customers every month that have added that, the second half of the year, the next year, as they've become more capable and able to leverage those aspects better. So important to know. And again, I remind you that, well, all the collection is done of the valuable data from hundreds of security vendors and partners' devices. We also have, as I've indicated here, the security connected solution. That's what we touched on just a moment ago, which is that business liability across the systems networks, and essentially that ability to take action from the SIEM. So we talked about with EPO, the ability to go ahead and change policies at the endpoint and quarantine suspicious systems. That's, again, those are the capabilities that we have with Security Connected. So what I want to do now is go ahead and just do a quick summary, kind of reminder of where we are. We know that, as we pointed out right up front, 2014 was sadly a stellar year for breaches. And that's, a staggering and sad data point at the end of the day, because studies have shown that to minimize the impact of that type of thing, to go ahead and take potential threats and prevent them from becoming actual breaches, minutes count. Goes back to what you hear me say probably all too often, but it is a scary reality that every minute counts. And of those impacted last year in these studies, 70% of those were able to detect attacks in minutes because they had an advanced SIEM like McAfee, like ESM that we're talking about today. That's a big deal. That means that that actionable security intelligence that we talk about and that quickly can enable you to identify, investigate, and resolve threats really can make a difference, and it does make a difference. So as you saw some of the customers we have and their comments as I was speaking to you today, and some of those that I posted in the slide. So it's very important to understand that we talked about these 5 key requirements, which go to intelligence, actionability, and integrated. So as you even heard Andrew mention right up front, is that actionable intelligence is what's so critical. That is the ability that can often, more than not, keep us all out of the news. So what I wanted to spend some time on now is just to go ahead and let you know, how can I find out more? Where can I go to read more about ESM, read more about McAfee SIEM? So at the end of the day, we have some great information at the public website. You can go right to McAfee.com SIEM, and you will find some fantastic information that will walk you through the different appliances I showed you today, as well as the core SIEM and the core SIEM competencies. There are data sheets to cover up on each one of the options in a core SIEM that we discussed. There are some case studies, some of which you saw some commentary from. It's actually directly from some of those case studies that I shared with you today. There are some excellent case studies that give you an opportunity to relate to someone in a similar industry, in a similar size, in a similar situation. There's quite a range there. And also some solution briefs. When we talk about this actionable intelligence and the ability to go ahead and have a connected solution that can go ahead and take action, you'll find solution briefs and white papers that talk about that. And also, when we touch on white papers, as I've mentioned, speed and et cetera, there's actually an excellent white paper there that talks about the embedded database that I mentioned, the capabilities we have there, and our ability to scale as a solution. And of course, there are product reviews and awards, and we're always updating those. So I encourage you to go ahead and take a look there, and again, it gives you a chance to go further and deeper. So first off, what I wanted to say is thank you for taking time out of your lunch today. I really appreciate that, and thank you for Gotham for doing that. I believe that we had some questions, so I will turn that over to either Andrew or Lauren to get us going there.
Yeah, thanks again, Carl. That was great. And we do have some questions that came in. And I just want to remind everybody that's on the line that you can use the chat log at the bottom right of your screen to send any questions that you have for Carl or Andy, and we'll address them now. So I'll give you guys a minute. But in the meantime, we did have some come through, and I'll field them over to you now. So the first one is, why is performance important in a SIEM solution?
So clearly one of my favorite topics today, so someone was listening. So at the end of the day, again, as you pointed out, it's really an underlying need, right? So the ability to have that speed and scale not only contributes to the collection, but it's what can drive the value and of the intelligence, the advanced correlations we talked about, those real-time investigations, all of that that's so critical in today's minute cyber threat world, right? Minutes count, as you keep hearing me say. So also with ESM, performance counts in the ability to store all those events and flows. Can be billions and more, right, on a regular basis, on a daily basis. So keeping all that information available for not just queries and forensics and rules validation, but for compliance, like we touched on a little bit there, because the reality is that it needs to be able to be used for compliance, which means it needs to be very secure. So also, when we think about it from that perspective, large volumes of data really need to, with MAC-DSM, take it far beyond what is pattern matching to really provide long-term indicators of compromise for that actionable threat intelligence, right? So it goes back to the capability performance to deliver both real-time and historical. So also the rapid investigation to that data. So I need to be able to access that data quickly for that is often can be in long-term storage, so I can investigate those low and slow attacks. Like we talked, sometimes those APTs and other attacks that are out there will sit and spin in your system and hide very nicely, very quietly for a long time. So you need to be able to look at things from a low and slow approach. And again, also for auditing, I can't say enough, we all face, there can be multiple compliance pieces. So that ability to go ahead and deliver that audit and those reports and always be able to do continuous monitoring of your compliance posture just like you do for your threat posture.
Awesome. Thanks. Okay, we've got another one. How does McAfee SIEM support compliance initiatives?
Yes, and I touched on this probably too briefly at times, but at the end of the day, to go through that, the Unified Compliance Framework, UCF, we're actually directly integrated with that. So what does that mean? That enables a collect once, comply with many methodology. So it really meets the compliance requirements and keeps the audit efforts and expense to a minimum on your part. So as I mentioned, we include with McAfee ESM, McAfee SIEM, hundreds of pre-built dashboards and audit trails and reports for more than 240 global regulations and frameworks. So HIPAA and FISMA and GOBA and SOX, etc. So with the support for the UCF, that Unified Compliance Framework, it really brings the efficiencies to compliance that you need. It normalizes the specifics of each regulation. So it really gives you that single set of collected events to be easily mapped to the individual regulation. So, and again, all of that is included in the ESM. We don't charge additional for compliance. It's actually part of the product. And again, it's all integrated and includes the reports, the rules, and the dashboards, all of which are customizable to your organization's needs for compliance.
Excellent. Okay, we've got actually two more. Does ESM help us in detecting advanced threats?
It does. So we'll go back and touch on a couple things earlier. So at the end of the day, one of the biggest ways it can do that, and we'll talk more about other areas it can, but it's understanding that how is my network used today, right? So the user activity, the traffic, the application use, you need to be able to understand what is normal activity so that you can identify when something is not normal. So any variation from that you want to know. It's essentially an anomaly detection, right? So ESM calculates a baseline activity for all the information in real time. It provides the alerts to support that baseline, all of which are customizable, and that allows you to discover threats before they occur. The idea, again, is discover those threats when they're in their infancy, so to speak, for lack of a better term, and then at the same time analyzing that data for patterns that may indicate a larger threat. Has it gone elsewhere? I need to be able to do that. That's another core capability. In addition, when you look at the contextual information such as vulnerability scans, identity authentication management systems, we touched on STIX and taxi, third-party web URLs, all of that enriches that event. So each event essentially has that context so that you have a better understanding of what the real impact of that threat can be to your business processes. So it really allows you to go ahead and, I think I mentioned this earlier, but align the right data with the right people, take action, and to be able to make much smarter decisions because you've gone through that understanding of where this threat is impacting, why it's important, has it done it both in real time and historical, in all the areas it may be. So, and again, stopping it in its infancy and understanding it so that it stays there.
Great. The next one is, do you have any tips on making a cost versus benefit case for upper management?
We do. So one of the big areas you should be aware about that really can be a benefit to cost management, and we've worked on some of this type of approach even with the likes of some of our large analysts in the SIEM industry, is start with focusing on the intelligence it gives you, and then start a lot with focusing on the ease of use. We all know that one of the biggest pain points that legacy SIEMs bring to the table and often can give SIEM a black eye is just the incredibly overly complex, unintuitive, so to speak, and challenge of managing a SIEM. So one of the biggest areas we find, and I've been a part of pitching to upper management of certain companies is, can I go ahead and get value out of this SIEM? And you've heard me mention that a couple times here this morning. It is really critical. That's why I emphasize the performance and the ease of use and so much that is out of the box for you. Even to the point, if any of you recall when I mentioned what essentially are those advanced use cases, so those content packs. You should be looking for and making sure that you make upper management as part of the purchasing or upgrading decision that these capabilities are there. They're going to make my life more effective in security and us more effective in meeting the challenges of threat. So starting those simple areas, because as simple as it sounds, it goes back to what we were talking about so much this morning. If I cannot get some information easily or quickly, I'm a hurting unit and I'm at risk, right? And that's the last thing you want to be reporting back to your upper management after the fact, right?
Okay, awesome. I think that's it for right now in terms of questions. But I'll send out a note to everybody post-webinar to give them, an opportunity to get back to me via email if they've got anything else, and I'll happily connect them with Andy, Carl, or anyone on either of our teams that makes sense.
Please do. Look forward to it.
Yeah, so thanks again to Andy and Carl, and to everybody who joined us. Just a reminder that this webinar was recorded, so the content will be available to anyone that's interested in sharing or rewatching. So if there are no further questions, I want to thank everybody again and hope you all have a great afternoon. Thanks, guys.
Thank you. Thanks for joining us.